a gentleman talked a little bit about abortion before and the religious component to this. And I have an issue with the fact, as you have often said, up until the Reagan era, there was no abortion polarity in regards to voting Republican, Democrat. And all of a sudden, the Republicans were all in with both feet, and the born-again contingent of the Republican Party. Now, my question arises, I'm thinking, what caused all the horseshoe crabs to come together at the same time and meet? And what I mean by that is, I believe that the religious right, the leaders of the religious right are bought. I believe that a lot of money is being spread around with the pastors and this community, giving them a good life that they would not have with their 15, 20 parishioner congregations. And I would hope that some newspaper or other media would pick this up. I don't know what your thoughts are on the subject.
Bruce, there have been multiple, actually books written about this. What happened was, you're correct. In 1973, we had we had the Roe v. Wade decision, which legalized abortion across the United States. And at that time, if you said right to life, you were talking about the anti-death penalty movement, which called itself the Right to Life movement. And by 77, 78, 79, the anti-abortion movement was rebranding itself as pro-life, or as the Right to Life movement, and stealing that from the anti-death penalty people. But the big event was Ronald Reagan being nominated for president in 1980 in that election, and with George Herbert Walker Bush as his vice president. George H.W. Bush then brought his son, George W. Bush, a recovering alcoholic and a born-again Christian, into, well, actually, he's never admitted that he's a recovering alcoholic. I think it's just fairly obvious. But in any case, brought him into the campaign as the liaison to the religious right. And Jerry Falwell at that time, if you're old enough to remember the 80s, that was the decade of, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker and Jerry Falwell and, all these televangelists. It had really become a thing. Well, that really started like in 77, 78, 79. It started just before the 80s. And one of the big things that really boosted it was in 1975, if I'm remembering correctly. You'd have to look it up. Hal Lindsey published a book called The Late Great Planet Earth. And, laying out the fact that the rapture, or his assertion that the rapture is coming, and rapture hysteria. And then the Left Behind series got printed, these novels, and this all kind of fed right into 1980. So George W. Bush became the liaison along with Jerry Falwell and Ralph Reed, and these guys created this so-called Christian coalition, basically took over the Republican Party. And there was a debate, we've got to have an issue. Religious people have to have an issue. What will the issue be? What is it that we can bring to the table? What can we campaign on? And there were some people who were saying it should be pornography. We should be going against pornography, and we should be going against dirty words in song lyrics. Tipper Gore later picked that up in the 90s. But they decided, well, that's not going to do so well. I don't know if they were doing polling or what. But like I said, there's been books that have the whole story in them. But what they ultimately decided would be their issue was abortion. And that then was the birthing. And by the way, Reagan had signed, as governor of California, the most liberal abortion law in America, allowing abortion in California, before Roe v. Wade, before 1973. Yep. And George Herbert Walker Bush had been, I don't believe he was on the board of Planned Parenthood, but he was a big supporter of them, and I think his wife might have been on the board of one of the local ones. They were huge.
I was going to ask that. I thought that was the case. HW was on the board.
Yeah, well, fact check me, because I'm not certain, and you know, I don't want to say things without a caveat that I'm not absolutely certain of on this program. I want people to be able to take anything I say to the bank. But whether he was on the board or not, he was on the record, both George Herbert Walker Bush and Barbara Bush, as being huge supporters of Planned Parenthood. Not so much about abortion, but just Planned Parenthood in general, birth control in particular. So that all changed in 1980 with that election, and by 1981, you know, it was off to the races, and so that's how we got where we are. Bruce, I have to move along, but thank you for the call. It was a